So what if you found out there was another you, a version of yourself living a totally different life, but in the very same city? For Nobel laureate Orhan Pamuk, this wasn't just some passing thought. No, it was this lifelong obsession that started in his childhood and would end up shaping everything he ever wrote.
Our story starts and ends right here, in the sprawling, mysterious, and absolutely beautiful city of Istanbul. But this is more than just a backdrop. For writer Orhan Pamuk, this city is, well, it's everything. It's a character, a mirror, and the keeper of all his secrets.
And this feeling, this is what kicked the whole thing off. With just this one little suspicion, Pamuk sets the stage for a lifetime of exploring a kind of hidden reality, this nagging sense that somewhere out there, another life was being lived in his name.
So who was this other Orhan? Let's dive into this idea of his ghostly twin, someone who roamed the same city streets but lived in a completely different world.
Now, what's really fascinating is that this wasn't like a clear-cut imaginary friend. It was more like a doppelganger, that classic literary idea of a ghostly double. The way Pamuk tells it, this feeling just sort of grew out of the confusing fog of being a kid, a mix of family whispers, anxieties, and a child's brain trying to make sense of a world that felt, well, a little shaky.
The seed for all of this was planted when he was just 5 years old. His parents separated, and for a short time, he was sent to live in another house. That physical separation created a mental one, and that's what gave birth to the idea that there was another Orhan living in that other house, a ghost that would follow him for years to come.
So this vague feeling kind of haunted him for years. But what happens when that ghost is suddenly given a face? Yeah, a simple photograph is about to turn this whole internal mystery completely on its head.
So picture this. You're a little kid visiting your aunt. On her wall, mixed in with all the other family photos and trinkets, is a picture of a boy. A boy who looks a lot like you, but he isn't you, or at least you don't think he is.
And then your family, with these big, jovial smiles, they point to the picture and say this. They're just being cheerful and good-humored, saying it with such certainty. But for the young Orhan, their happy confidence only makes his own doubt feel that much deeper.
Right, so their whole vibe was light and happy, which was the complete opposite of the profound confusion that was just bubbling up inside his mind.
And boom, that's the question that just clicks everything into place. Suddenly, this ghostly feeling has a face. Is this him? The other him? The boy from that other house he was sent to? All of a sudden, the imaginary feels terrifyingly real. But, as time went on, the nature of this other Orhan started to shift. What began as this kind of scary, confusing thing slowly morphed into something else entirely. It became an escape.
So this basically created two different worlds inside his head. On one side, you've got his reality in the Pamuk apartments, a world he connected with unhappiness. But on the other side, you have the imagined world of the other house, and that place was all about pure, simple happiness.
So here's the key takeaway. This fantasy became his safe haven. Anytime he felt unhappy, he'd just retreat into the world of the other Orhan. He'd imagine how perfect his life was over there. And honestly, the pleasure he got from that daydream was so real, so powerful, he never even felt the need to find out if the house or the kid actually existed. The fantasy was just better. So, what does a boy who lives so vividly inside his own head do when he grows up? He becomes a writer, of course. And this is where his personal story really starts to connect with his life's work.
And you don't have to take my word for it. Pamuk says it himself right here. He gives the credit for his persistence as a writer, his ability to sit alone in a room for years and build entire worlds from words, to this childhood bond. That connection gave him a deep sense of solace, a powerful comfort and relief from the real world. The other Orhan wasn't just an escape, he was like his very first collaborator.
And that comfort, that relief, it taught him that his own imagination could be a kind of home. And isn't that really the whole point of great literature? And what's interesting is that his first dream was to be a painter, another art form where you're alone, just building worlds. But in the end, he chose writing. It was the perfect medium to explore all those inner landscapes he'd been mapping out since he was a child.
All right, let's tie this all together. How did this super personal, internal story about a ghostly twin end up shaping one of the most celebrated authors on the planet?
Well, the proof is right there in his books. You pick up a work like Istanbul Memories and the City, and it is just soaked in these themes. That feeling of another self, the blurry line between what's real and what's a memory, the soul of a place, It all goes back to that little boy staring at a picture on a wall.
And it is crystal clear that this very personal story hits a nerve. I mean, how much? Well, we're talking over 13 million copies of his books sold worldwide. That really proves that his private mystery speaks to something universal.
And that just shows you how universal these ideas are. The search for who you are, that feeling of being an outsider in your own life. I mean, people get that all over the world. It proves that the story of the other Orhan is, in a way, a story about all of us. And yet, after all that global success, he's still deeply rooted in Istanbul. His mother used to ask him this, really urging him to leave, to go see the world. But how could he? His whole universe, his inspiration, his other self, it was all right there in the streets of his own city. And that kind of leaves us with one final thought. Pamuk found his other self in a photograph and a different house in his city, and it shaped his entire life. So it makes you wonder, in the stories we tell ourselves, in the paths we don't take, where do we find our own other selves?